The last week in January started out with NC State at Duke on Monday night. And then on Tuesday, North Carolina was up on the banks of Three Rivers taking on former Duke player Jeff Capel, Mr. Half Court himself. But all week long, anything anybody was talking about in basketball here on Tobacco Road was about North Carolina's Saturday night date at Cameron Indoor Stadium against the Duke Blue Devils. So earlier in timeout, David Glenn was talking about Duke being the tallest team in college basketball. North Carolina, with R.J. Davis and Elliot Cadeau, one of the smallest teams. So maybe it is a David and Goliath matchup coming on Saturday night. ESPN Game Days in town, fellas. How does Duke and North Carolina set up for the first meeting of this season between the Tar Heels and the Blue Devils?
Well, we talked about pride. There's no greater game in college basketball where pride matters more than anything else than those games. For all the faults that Carolina may have internally, externally, roster management, you can pretty much throw a lot of that out the window when it comes to Duke and Carolina. And I don't need to tell this audience right now what that means. I just know those games are really, really special. And we all know we look forward to one at the end of the season. But this one actually carries just as much weight given the time and the relevance of it, in that Duke is kind of running roughshod over everybody. And Carolina really needs something to give them a jolt heading into February. So two different reasons for why this game is important outside of the obvious for both teams coming in. And at a time we're in the middle of the season where there needs to be some sort of separation internally, externally, Carolina really, really needs this. And they really need to show that they are that good of a team with the talent that they have. It's going to be a long week in practice heading in. I know they got a game before that, but the onus is on Carolina and the staff. And David mentioned this. Every guy a Carolina guy. Every guy has their own Duke story to tell, right? Maybe more than one, maybe four Duke, maybe eight Duke stories to tell, right? You got to really be cautious of, feeding on the past of what has been in the Carolina Duke, as opposed to really focusing on the present of what needs to be in Carolina Duke. And that's for Carolina to take that 1-7 quad one record and really supercharge it with a win against probably the best team, if not one of the three best teams in the country, let alone the league. It's a looming large game for both teams, but really for Carolina, one I think they almost have to try to come out on top on if they really want to have a shot with no mishaps in February. This one can kind of cure a lot of evils if you can get this one on Saturday.
Yeah, to me, Mike, we got a little bit of a snapshot of how this game could unfold when Duke went to Wake Forest. The Deacs and the Tar Heels have some differences, but here's where they're the same. They are both among the better defensive teams in the ACC. Wake and Carolina, I know the BC game was a bit of an anomaly for the Tar Heels defensively, but for the ACC conference play, Wake, Duke, and Carolina are three of the best, if not the three best defensive teams. So Carolina has to play great defense against Duke, the way Wake did bother Duke with its defense. The challenge for the Tar Heels, of course, as Carolina's had weird offensive backcourt chemistry, just as for different reasons, Wake's offensive pieces haven't fit together. We've talked about the lack of a point guard and Hunter Salas and Cameron Hildreth, not quite clicking on all cylinders, and Tyler Johnson, the young point guard, not ready to be a top-level player. Carolina, for different reasons, has had weird backcourt offensive chemistry. And to me, it boils down to the Tar Heels offensively must find several scorers the way ultimately Wake ran out of scorers in a low-scoring game against Duke. I mean, Hunter Salas got 12. The guy coach circled on a previous show, Juke Harris, the freshman at Wake, came off the bench with 14 points and looked really good. And I think his continued improvement is one of the reasons I think Wake can still make the NCAA tournament. It doesn't matter which players. It could be Ian Jackson and Seth Trimble and R.J. Davis. It could be a surprise for the Tar Heels. But they need a minimum of three guys just to get on that offensive roll against an elite Duke team that's not going to give you a lot of easy buckets. It could be RJ just nailing a bunch of threes. It could be Trimble attacking the basket, whatever. They need, they're not going to have a lot of scoring in the post. So maybe three of those top four guards. Cadeau was very good offensively for much of that game against Wake Forest. RJ has been shooting a little bit better from three-point range. Seth Trimble was brilliant offensively earlier this year, not as often lately, but he had a great double-double against Boston College. It doesn't matter how you get there, and I agree with Coach. I think when Carolina plays Duke, all those distractions are going to go out the window. Those young men are going to put all the people in their life on hold, and they're going to say, player agent or social media advisor or a kid sits next to me in class, they're going to shut them all out because these two games in Durham this week and then back at the Smith Center where I think the Tar Heels would have a better shot at an upset for obvious reasons. These are two of the biggest games left on Carolina's schedule in a year where they might end up near the bubble. If they can even steal one of the two, it would be, of course, their best win of the season, and possibly the difference between making the big dance or being left out for the second time in 4 years.